Hello there, welcome back to the Sustainability Show. I'm your host, Sustainability Magazine Editor-in-Chief, Blaise Hope. And joining me today is our contributing editor, deputy editor even, Helen Adams. Helen, thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So on today's show, we're going to talk about the latest news as usual, and we will have a special guest joining us live. We're going to have Robert Copeland, the outgoing Chief Procurement Officer of global security giant G4S. But first, we must discuss our poll for this week. So our poll for today, what do you think is most important for global sustainability? A sustainable food system, a sustainable waste stream, net zero, or something else? In which case, write what you think it is down in the comments. Trying to force some hard choices there. We also have a comment coming in here from Alice Calrow saying a shift towards sustainability reporting contextualized against planetary budgets, thresholds, and societal boundaries, which we are just starting to do even when it comes to emissions, but nothing else. Very interesting point there. It's great to have this kind of contribution from our audience. Thank you, Alice, for saying that, and please continue to give your thoughts and join in, have a debate with Alice if you want, but as long as we are moving forward, that's what we're happy with. So hard choices aside, please vote in that and give us whatever your views are in the comments and questions. We'll be having our regular questioning session later in the show, but let's start by taking a look at the latest sustainability news. Awesome. So a look at some of our trending web stories. We've had quite a few, but we're trying to make an editorial selection here. First is our Evergreen, how to make ESG commitments, save money and the planet. This is kind of where the core of all our questioning for our audience goes. It goes into, okay, well, how do we get it done within our organization at large, for our SME, but especially across very large multinationals is where this comes about. And also, where can I evaluate this as someone on the outside looking in, whether that is a finance professional or someone who works for a metrics or ratings agency. Increasingly, this is becoming more important to understand and to follow this. Helen, I know that you had some thoughts on this as well.
Yes, I did. So I think it's very easy for a company to release a statement with a stock image of a tree and a few buzzwords and claim that the company is on the path to sustainability. But how can consumers tell if this is genuine?
Well, you're kind of hitting on the golden goose here, right? Because the way you settle all the arguments in this is, doesn't matter if you agree, doesn't matter if the consumers are making choices in a certain way. If you do not get with it, you're done in a certain number of years. And there's a degree of truth to that. It varies depending on the industry, the sector, and what you're selling. But it's certainly true that they are going to dictate it. And, the issue of greenwashing, it's very dangerous to greenwash for the fear of getting caught. If you get caught greenwashing, it does an enormous amount of damage to your reputation. The Volkswagen emissions scandal, and the brand is still recovering from it. And when you think about it, pretty shocking fraud to have perpetrated on the consumer public and has effectively destroyed the brand in a very, very large market. So, you have to be very dangerous. But, it happens on a much smaller scale as well. The difference is we are unifying, or rather the business world is unifying around metrics, agreeing what they are. Technologies and APIs, plugins, solutions firms are coming in to make it possible to measure, view, and grade this at depth through a company. And people are starting to expect that in terms of reporting. So if it doesn't come out and it's not up to scratch, it's going to get sniffed out very, very, very quickly. So the funny thing about stock images of trees and a few buzzwords is I actually really like stock images, not because they're meaningless. It's because they convey meaning, and they convey meaning as you intend. Now, obviously, if you're reporting on something, you wouldn't want to go to a stock image in that case. But stock images and buzzwords exist for a reason. And then they usually lead to data. So it's the image of where you're going and then the data to support that you're actually going there. Anyway, news story 2. And this is one that we had a fun discussion about. This is from Keysight Technologies, or our collaborations with them, a more sustainable future with 6G at Keysight Technologies.
Yeah, I was still getting my head around 5G, and as technology is moving faster than we can really keep up with it, 6G is already on the horizon. And I was wondering, how is 6G going to be more sustainable?
I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was funny when 5G was the 6G it is now. People were floating it about. And I remember this Chinese firm circulated an image which was 5G captured and downloaded of from the top of a tower. And you could zoom in to kind of any degree. And that was to show you how incredibly high resolution the image was. And it was meant to demonstrate the power of it. And it was very impressive. And we're kind of getting there now. So innovations happen sometime before they go into effect. And there are a lot of elements, for example, 5G broadcast, which is really ATS 3.0 developed by Sinclair Broadcasting Corporation, the broadcasting group, which they've reinvented how existing broadcasting technology can reach devices, which means suddenly it's much more possible to reach individuals and devices through a single CDN, content delivery network. And 6G with Keysight, I mean, I would be careful to go too hard on the technical stuff here. I would leave that to them. Please do go read the story about it. But it's about what it can support. So what can 5G support versus what this can support? Well, what 6G wants to support is the next level of what we imagine our communications are going to be. So prior to this, video calling was, well, right now we're streaming and we're having group calls with 100 people on them, and it's no problem. And the next thing is going to be, well, how do we be present in the room? This is where you get into augmented reality, so holographic transmission. This is also where there's some intersection with existing robotic processes. And they don't say this, I'm saying this, but I don't want to put words in their mouth. But robotic processes, autonomous vehicles with autonomous presence capabilities, telepresence, which puts you effectively in the room, moving around. And this all massively accelerated due to COVID, but it was already happening anyway. The investments were there. The technology was being refined to be expanded. And so 6G really, it's laying the groundwork for, right, we know these industries are going to hit the point. They're going to hit mass adoption. And by that point, we need to not just be rolling it out. We need to be fully rolled out and preparing 7G. And that's basically the way this works, is that, it's about preparing for where's technological development going to be 5 years from now. And because the distance is, infinitely greater, not infinitely. Sorry, there's actually a number. Careful of that hyperbole. But anyway, on to our third news story.
Yes.
Tech Mahindra, massive Indian firm, how Tech Mahindra extracts profitability from sustainability. And this, of course, goes to the key driving force behind Sustainability Magazine, BizClik Media Group, and certainly my interests in it is all of this is meaningless if we don't have a business case. And the reason why it's so interesting is because we've made the business case. Not us specifically, but everybody. It's done. We agree. And now it's about learning and sharing the stories of how this is actually happening. This by Tom Swallow. This is actually from our Sustainability Live digital stage. Sandeep Chadna from Tech Mahindra spoke and about what makes a company sustainable, and showed how insights at the company-wide level, and this is what it really comes down to, on gender pay, CO2 emissions, human rights. This is making the value chain visible, the supply chain visible, even at the sub-tier level. How you do that to find more effective ways to work at the same time as choosing better partners, making better decisions that meet ESG goals. Because in the end, the word sustainable is not a coincidence. Remove all the politics from it. To be sustainable is long-term to be more profitable.
I do like that stock image as well.
It is a good one. A bit on the nose, I think, by Tom Swallow there. But we'll take it anyway. Anyway, that is enough for our Ask Blaise segment. We need to get on and speak to our wonderful special guest, Robert. First, we're going to take a quick ad break, but we'll be straight back.
The supply chain transformation solution can help you balance business needs with ever-growing customer expectations. Delivering on customer promises while meeting expectations on cost, growth, and sustainability is a major challenge for supply chain leaders today. In addition, visibility beyond Tier 1 suppliers is critical to building resilience in the face of global volatility. Supply chain transformation helps put marketing, sales, finance, procurement, and operations in lockstep with supply chain constraints. Integrating these functions into supply chain planning can help enterprises achieve vastly improved customer service levels and forecasts that are up to 5 times more accurate. Effort and costs are reduced with inventory levels that can be up to 30% lower. Take advantage of artificial intelligence, AI, and analytics to build smarter fulfillment capabilities. We'll bring leading technologies, such as predictive order fulfillment, to drive the right inventory through your network, in the right place at the right time, and maximize service levels. Enable your agile supply chain by optimizing the physical infrastructure and flow across networks. Leading technologies can provide visibility, optimization, and predictive analytics capabilities to deliver on increased service requirements while maintaining profitability. Maximize product innovation and minimize time to market. Bring a holistic approach to enterprise data and technologies, such as digital twin and simulation software, to enhance digital design and product ideation. Consulting at EY can help you digitally transform. Beyond efficiency and productivity, your supply chain can be more responsive to markets, sustainable, resilient to disruption, and staffed with engaged and empowered employees. Find your path to long-term value with the EY Supply Chain Transformation Solution.
I love that. That's fantastic. So much information, and firms like EY, the impact they have on the world is just huge. I mean,
Yes.
footprint is unbelievable. So learning what they're up to is always fascinating and brilliant. Well, welcome back from the break. It is time for our guest, the former Chief Procurement Officer for G4S, the multinational private security firm that is one of the world's largest companies and one of its biggest employers, Robert Copeland.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, great to see you here.
Thank you.
I know, I know you are outgoing and you can't tell us about your next project, of course, but you have a significant amount of experience that we're thrilled to hear about. I've interacted with G4S at various levels on almost every continent now. And I know people who have also worked in places like Indonesia, Sub-Saharan Africa, in Dhaka, Bangladesh for G4S. So I know the company very well for an outsider, and I'm excited to have you on board here today. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Awesome. So just to begin, give our viewers a sense of your career to date, and then we'll get into some concepts.
Yes, well, thank you, Blaise. So I've been in the procurement world for over 20 years. I started in the automotive in Paris, working for Peugeot Citroën. I've moved into FMCG, logistics, and then until recently, global security and outsourcing. So it's been a fascinating career so far, and really procurement as a place from which to add value to drive the change that needs to happen in organizations has remained relevant, certainly over the last 20 years.
Well, procurement really makes kind of everything come together. It's sort of this one word that covers sort of how everything works. We had a conversation prior to this that I said we need to pause and we need to have this, on screen. And we were talking about, the things that matter and the things that are changing, and how reinventing and reimagining what we are about, from learning the lessons of the past and combining that with what our new incentives are. Do you want to just take over from that train of thought? Because I think I was just quoting you back at you.
Yes. Procurement is a function, is a vocation that consistently has to reinvent itself. If you look at procurement 20 years ago, what was the height of importance, assurance of supply, moved on as the world really focused on globalization, prosperity through peace, certainly bringing into the fold the perception that China and obviously Russia will create a more peaceful world through that prosperity of trade, which has obviously been proven completely wrong quite recently. Over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen a real fantastic focus on the ESG agenda, starting obviously with net zero, certainly in the consumer industries where you were talking about single-use plastics, you were really looking at the ethics of your supply chain. Suddenly what we've seen is a reinvention, a rediscovery that the challenges that faced businesses 20 years ago, certainly the ability to ensure that the resilience of your supply chain was there, is suddenly come back to the forefront. In the past, it was probably more, when I worked in the automotive industry, we looked at dual sourcing, we looked at all of the basic ways, which is more driven not by the geopolitical situation, but often due to the levels of quality of production in certain low-cost country sourcing locations at the time, and you wouldn't hedge your bets solely with that. What we've seen today is, with the complete disruption and the perception that globalization was the golden goose that laid the golden egg for supply chain, has suddenly cracking at the seams. So I think in terms of procurement, the ability to reimagine, reinvent, and to drive that relevancy of procurement and supply chain has come to the forefront. Because how do we ensure that we strike the right balance of mitigation against inflation? Again, something that in the West, we hadn't really thought too heavily about for the last 20 years. Suddenly it's come back with a vengeance. At the same time, the solutions in the past, low-cost country sourcing, are a lot less robust. And therefore, for a procurement person to add value and to really provide answers to the questions that the business are asking, how do we make our supply chain sustainable, not just in terms of an ethical point of view, but in terms of an operational? How do we actually build that resilience and recover it? So genuinely, I think procurement has a fantastic opportunity to highlight its relevancy, but there's no easy answers to some of the challenges that we're facing.
Well, I mean, you've touched on, right, no easy answers. I want to talk a little bit more about, you were just getting into, these globalized supply chains not being as robust as, we had hoped they were. Do you think that out of this comes a more holistic approach to finding low-cost supply bases, but finding the right ones, or being able to switch between them, perhaps more elasticity and relationships? What makes sense for you?
It depends on the category, depends on the sector, and depends on the industry. But certainly what I've seen is, when we looked at automotive direct buying 20, 30 years ago, we would look at assurance of supply as one of the key things, along with cost. There's no point buying cheap if you can't source it. And the days of Peugeot 20 years ago, when the company was on a high, it was building the Peugeot 306, the Peugeot 206. It couldn't, the diesel engines were seen as a fantastic solution to the future of automotive. Obviously, again, recently proven possibly not so correct, but they just simply couldn't build enough. So when we were negotiating with suppliers, when we were developing the strategies, it wasn't uniquely about cost. Obviously, it was important, because in the automotive industry, cost is a critical part of the product that's been built. But it really was around the resilience and, can I secure it? Certainly, I think today, the added ingredient is, as we saw with the pandemic, you might have a contract, you might have a nicely polished supply chain, but suddenly governments will step in, especially when it came to PPE or vaccines, where you saw in the European Union, where the UK had secured a contract for vaccines, all legitimate, above board, but suddenly countries were trying to block exports and so forth. So there's that dynamic that people then need to start putting in the mix. Now, it's less likely to be the case for automotive components versus medicines, but the principle's the same. Will globalization stand up to the shocks And let's be honest, the backward steps that people are making in globalization as they retreat to a more nationalistic, more regional focus in terms of what they do, and how can the supply chain meet that changing dynamic?
Well, I think. Well, Helen, sorry, would you like to ask something? Because I'm running off on a train already.
I'm just stuck on the recovery and resilience, and a bit of a where do we go from here? And will people learn lessons from the past 2 years? Do you have faith that they will?
I do. I think procurement people as a breed are very dynamic. They are very quick to identify solutions. It's part of the DNA of a good buyer. The challenges around building confidence in the business to possibly make difficult decisions, where in the past, it was about cost. It was around a range of other P&L impacting decisions. But actually, the buyer has to have the courage of their convictions to go back to a business and say, look, it might cost you more. You might have to have more complexity in your supply chain, but at the end of the day, it will give you the consistency and the stability that all businesses need. Stability is absolutely critical. There's no point in having a fantastic product if you can't source the components. So that dynamic, the procurement needs to champion this, has been seen as, I'm bringing a solution to the table. It might be more complex. I've got the ability to identify it. I've got the ability to implement it, and I've got the ability to measure and track it. So yes, I do have the confidence, but people need to realize that we are going to see a change. It's unlikely that we will go back to the happy days of 10, 15 years ago. You only need to look at Brexit. You only need to look at Trump and all of these populist approaches, that the world is becoming a different place. And therefore, we need to be able to think ahead and think, right, how do I secure it? And what decisions do I need to make? And how do I get the business on that journey?
Right. Yeah, it just reminds me of whenever I get sick, as soon as I get better, I completely forget that I was completely bedridden for a whole week, and I just get on with my life and live as much as I can in the recovery. And I would be worried that businesses will do that when the pandemic is fully in the past. But of course, we know also over the past 2 years, other things have happened. So the Suez Canal and now the war in Ukraine. I guess the next thing, what do you feel sort of in any way what the next supply chain crisis will be?
If I had if I had a crystal ball, I would be a very, very rich person.
What's on your bingo card?
The reality for me, it's around agility of the supply chain.
Okay.
There's some fantastic stuff with ESG. The net zero piece, that's not going to go away. It might incur some delays, but the ability to tangibly measure it and then drive that change. What we're going to see is procurement buyers having to juggle a lot of plates.
Yeah.
Investors themselves, where in the past it was often a consumer-driven pressure on environmental and social issues. But because in the B2B space, where your business customers possibly were less concerned, but the investors, you only need to look at the G4S Norwegian investors 4 or 5 years ago, when they turned around and dumped the G4S shares because they had concerns over some of the ethical risks of where G4S operated. So what we're now seeing is these things are here to stay. There are new problems that will arise. You've got automation, you've got AI. Your buyers got to be incredibly capable at prioritizing, incredibly capable at juggling a range of problems that, if you drop it, could hurt the business either reputationally or indeed operationally. So I'm sure there'll be another problem coming up, but I just think at the moment the buyers have got to focus on, are they agile? Are the teams capable of juggling multiple challenges all at once?
It seems to me that this all seems to come down to visibility. It's, we have a massive, we have a lot of audience in India, for example, and they're tuning in online in the comments. Hello to all you guys. We always do. understanding, for example, suppliers in the Indian subcontinent, in South Asia, having much more visibility on what they're doing. I mean, surely that's where you would protect yourself, Robert, from being liable in a situation, so you avoid a situation like the Norwegian fund dropping its investment.
Precisely, and there's a lot of solutions out there. There isn't one size fits all, but at G4S we partnered with EcoVadis, obviously a well-known organization. That for what appealed to me with a lot of those solutions out there is it wasn't just about capturing data. It's not just about providing a buyer with raw information, because not every buyer is qualified to be able to interpret that and then make informed decisions. So a lot of the products and solutions out there not just capture information, but they provide insight. They provide the ability for a buyer, or indeed anybody else, to work with management and explain to them what the problem is, and then more easily define a solution. So transparency in the supply chain, especially the challenges in Africa, in India and so forth, where it's absolutely essential. If a company is truly going to live the values it talks about, it's got to be able to demonstrate it. And a perfect case in point is a lot of the FMCG companies that are still operating in Russia, where we are seeing mass murder. We are seeing a lot of pretty hideous things at the moment. A lot of these companies, if you go to their websites, they talk about fantastic values, yet are they actually truly living it, or is it just a marketing ploy? So I do think a lot of buyers out there and a lot of consumers will be incredibly cynical around the ESG agenda unless a company is able to explain what, not just what they're doing, but the evidence it's having and the change it's making. And therefore, that's why the tools mean we've partnered with Integrity Next, a range of fantastic companies that it's not the silver bullet, but it gets us far further down the line with minimal effort, and then the ability to go back to the business or investors or whoever and say, look, here, this is what's happening, and here's the evidence.
Brilliant. Helen, did you have another question? We have one in from the audience, actually. Would be good to squeeze that on.
I do. So again, I go back to the pandemic every time. Over the past 2 years, I've heard young people say, I want to be an epidemiologist, I want to be a nurse. And until I worked with BizClik Media, I did not know what procurement was. But do you think there'll be an increase in children and young people looking at procurement as a career option?
I'm going to be honest and say probably not.
Oh.
When I was young, I didn't wake up wanting to be a buyer.
Yeah, it's not a very customer-facing role. It's sort of in the background, but it's, I would say, an essential role.
It is. And what we are seeing is emerging, a merger between supply chain management and procurement. Procurement as a process, I'm afraid to say, in 10, 15 years' time, will be automated.
Yeah.
If you want a career in procurement, it's more likely that you're going to want a more supply chain orientated, because that's where the problem is. That's where the human aspect will be retained. And I see procurement playing a greater role within supply chain, not just at the point of contract, but throughout the life cycle. So I do see a very bright future for a combined procurement supply chain function, and fascinating in terms of the influence and the day-to-day operational versus strategic mix that will be there. But do I see people rushing out saying procurement? Probably not.
Thank you.
We've got, I want to squeeze in one from the audience, and I don't feel like it's one I could do justice to. So just quickly, it's a private user, so we're not sure who, but interesting to see we have a global audience where many of us are increasingly liable for sustainability performance. What impact is this having on your decision making?
It's having a huge impact, or it had a huge impact. I mean, you only need to look at the company annual reports of the last few years, where in the past there was probably no reference to procurement, but now you have pages on sustainability, pages on all of this, and investors pushing investor relationship managers to say, right, what are you doing about it? So the onus, people are looking around and saying, right, is there a CSR department? Possibly. If not, who manages the suppliers? Who manages where the bulk of the risk sits? It sits with procurement. So yes, I do think there's a huge liability, but again, in terms of moving procurement up the food chain, I personally think it's fantastic, that procurement are then sitting with senior leaders, not just talking about how they measure the cost saving, but what are they doing that actually investors and customers are demanding. So personally, it's incredibly exciting, but as with it comes additional responsibility, the ability to actually prove what you're doing and not just simply coming up with a nice motto or tagline on a picture on a wall. The proof really is demonstrate what you're doing. Don't just talk about it.
Absolutely. Robert, thank you. I think we could talk all day, but that's all we have time for now. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And Robert Copeland, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So next week, we have a very special event. It's the Procurement and Supply Chain Live, April 27th to 28th at Tobacco Dock in London. I'm going to be on stage. Helen will be in the crowds. We're going to talk a bit about it after the break and also go through the rest of our comments and the results of our poll. But first, let's check out this wonderful trailer.
Now more than ever, procurement and supply chain are in the spotlight.
In procurement, we're looking at risks from a number of different angles.
From pandemic pressures to container ship congestion, geopolitical uncertainties to food and energy security. It's a world full of risk, but also resilience. Leading organizations and executives have found a way through innovation, perseverance, and flexibility.
We weren't sure the number of people who had the virus. We weren't sure.
Procurement professionals have forged essential partnerships, and supply chain leaders have simply delivered to keep the world moving. Join us for the Risk and Resilience Conference at Procurement and Supply Chain Live. Hear from more than 60 inspirational speakers from innovative global companies and network with thousands of industry professionals. Secure your place now.
Well, we are really looking forward to that. It's going to be a fascinating 2 days and always a privilege to get to be a part of it. Don't forget to tune in online or get yourself a ticket and see you there in person. I'll be on stage along with our Chief Content Officer, Scott Birch. If you hunt around the crowds, you will also see Helen, as well as our Editors-in-Chief of Procurement and Supply Chain, Georgia Wilson, and Sean Ashton. Okay, sorry, Ashton. I don't know if I blank. Anyway, we're going to have a quick look at our comments now. We've had loads coming in. As usual, we have comments in from India, also from Colombia. We have someone who's interested to hear more from Helen Adams. So am I. And we'll be having Helen on a lot more to have more. We had someone from Dallas, Texas saying, yes, there are people in Texas. We do believe in silence and climate change. Don't worry. We know Texas is a big state. We have a global audience. But we also have now some interesting points about our poll, which we're about to get the results to, from Mario Elias Gonzalez. The S in ESG, social, is about the just transition. Make sure the S is not forgotten to achieve net zero. And I think that's a big part. Social impact in all these decision making, they're at the center. It's at the center of it. It's being enforced. It's being now enforced in procurement by law in the United Kingdom, but this is happening in other countries right now. Someone else, private user, if you don't buy sustainable solutions, you'll be increasing your future corporate risk profile. Well, I mean, this is exactly what Robert was touching on. You are increasing your future risk. You may well not be around. So it's not even a question of, you might not be around if you don't sort it out relatively quickly, because people can make the decisions as a market rapidly and also be delaying global net zero objectives. Very good point. Now, we are here for the results of our poll, and we do have them. So the question was, what do you think is most important for global sustainability? A sustainable food system, a sustainable waste stream, net zero, or other? And to write in the comments below. Well, other came in at 3%, and we got a little bit of that in the comments. A sustainable food system, 21%. Healthy, I mean, it's very important, but I guess we can eat anyway. A sustainable waste stream, 24%, a bit more. And where all our rubbish goes, it's incredibly important. Net zero, whopping 52% overall supermajority here. That isn't a surprise. I think people get the urgency and they know how important that is. But at the same time, I think one of the ways you tackle it is through a more sustainable food system and waste stream, hence making the hard choice. What do you think, Helen?
I think you can't have one without the other with regards to the sustainable food system and the sustainable waste stream. They've got to go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we've gone through our comments and our poll, there's only one thing left, and it's Ask Blaise. Yeah, still terrible. Okay, well, Helen, we've got questions from you. I was going to have a quick shout out one from the comments quickly. The LinkedIn user. Yeah, what impact is this having on decision making? Look, no one's been, the role of liability for sustainable performance. You're not going to get investment from investors who are considering this as part of their investment strategy and evaluations for your long-term viability as a business, as well as the actual beliefs of the high net worth individuals who are inheriting fortunes, who are behind a lot of these firms, but also companies, their own liability. Pension funds, they don't want to back, businesses that are not aligned with the values that they have. That's just the value basis. There's also just a business case. So you are liable for it, and you may be liable for it directly as well as simply through market forces. And I think you can reasonably expect that to happen. Helen, over to you. Ask me anything.
I saw a video recently of Elon Musk being interviewed by a TED Talk person, and off topic, but I think you could definitely cosplay as Elon Musk.
Are you asking me to do that?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is yes. No.
My question was, Elon Musk actually said he feels that the future is going to be okay. And I think for so many years, I've just heard people say, the future's ruined. We've ruined our planet. We're drowning in plastic and we're all going to die. Yeah. And to actually hear Elon Musk say he thinks that the future is going to be all right if we take accountability for ourselves and continue to work very hard. I think I agree, but it was actually comforting to hear someone say that. What do you think? Well, is he just trying to get people to buy more Teslas? No.
Well, I mean, look, he's always trying to. Why not? There's 2 points, and he's right. And 2 main reasons. I'll quote George Carlin, the Stand Up First. The planet's fine. The people are in trouble. The planet will still be here. It's not exactly what he said, but I can't say it on our LinkedIn Live. But no, the point stands. Look, there's 2 things here that people don't desperately understand. One is the pace of our being held accountable means we will deal with things. At a time when technological innovation is increasing at a pace, things that were impossible a second ago are suddenly possible. Okay, so he's right to actually have that faith in the way things are going. I have a lot of faith. I really believe that these are all solvable problems, even if we can't see the solution now, because things that we didn't have a solution before, we suddenly do. You need a crisis to generate innovation, to generate push, to generate motivation, and then we can get an unbelievable amount of things done. We are having these crises right now, from the climate, from Ukraine, trying to avoid a 3rd world war, trying to avoid a nuclear war, visible human rights abuses, trying to really firm our position away from that, having kind of forgotten that we have to. I think on a large scale, people, some countries, frankly, had forgotten that they would have to prepare for something like that. But the other thing is automation, right? The other thing is, what if the robots take over? Look, AI works on probabilities. That fine-tuning decision-making that we make at the end of it, we're still going to need to make that. Because whatever it is, we'll get there. However, cutting out the legwork, that is going to make a huge difference to how well we can handle things and how well we can deal with problems. Now, there'll be new problems that are coming up, but we don't know what they are yet. But he's right. Look, the planet's in a pretty good place. Not in terms of the climate, but in terms of, we went our population from 1 to 7 billion in no time at all because of the advances we made in sanitation, healthcare, mass manufacture of consumer goods, out to all corners of the world, proliferation of education, of medicine and training. I mean, this has had an unbelievable effect, and this is driven by companies. Companies are getting behind this. He's right to be optimistic.
Yeah. Cool. My second question was, I think my buzzword, if you will, is resilience. And what's yours?
Well, I think resilience is kind of the point, right? What is the point of building something that can't stand the tests that are going to get thrown at it? You know, I think it's a big one for me. I mean, for me, it's business case, because I don't like, you know, people trying to bring ideology and politics into the decision making. It's irrelevant. This is about doing things in a way that wouldn't you want to do things in a way that in 40 years it wouldn't cause you a problem, and you know it's going to cause you a problem, but you do it anyway. I think that's mine. But resiliency and I think sensibility. Just think about it. That's what sustainability comes down. Just think about it, and we'll get there. Look, I'm going to keep rambling unless I'm careful. But Helen, it's been wonderful to have you on for the first time. We will have you again next time.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. That's all we've got time for this episode. Thanks once again to Robert Copeland for being our guest. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and make sure you all tune again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for interacting with us if watching live and taking part in the poll. And remember, this show is available to watch on demand. So please do share it with colleagues and anyone interested in sustainability. Thanks to Kieran, Greta, and the rest of the video production team. This has been a BizClik Media Group show. See you next time.